Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Infinity Learning. The topic that we are going to discuss today is the human heart. This is how our heart looks like and this is how fast our heart works. Now the question is, how fast does it beat per minute? 72 beats per minute. Come, let us see how does our heart works. In this video, we are going to learn about the basic structure, function and anatomy of heart, the layers of the heart wall, the 4 chambers of the heart, the 4 valves of the heart tissue. Heart is a muscular organ which pumps blood through the vessels of our body. It is an important organ which is responsible for sustaining life. It is a muscular organ with 4 chambers: right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. Besides humans, most other animals also possess a heart that pumps blood throughout their bodies. Even invertebrates such as grasshoppers possess a heart-like pumping organ, though they do not function the same way as a human heart does. Come, let us study about the anatomy of the heart. Left atrium receiving oxygenated blood. The left ventricle receives the blood from left atrium. Right atrium receiving deoxygenated blood. Right ventricle receiving blood from right atrium. Superior vena cava receiving blood from the upper part of the body. Inferior vena cava receiving blood from the lower part of the body. Aorta, aortic semilunar valve. Pulmonary semilunar valve. Left pulmonary veins. Tricuspid valve. Interventricular septum. Bicuspid valve. Pulmonary artery. Now let us learn about the layers of the heart wall. The heart is composed of a specialized type of a muscle tissue known as the cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is a striated muscle that is present only in the heart. The heart muscle is composed of 3 layers: epicardium, outermost layer of the heart; myocardium, the middle layer of the heart and conducts the pumping action; endocardium, the innermost layer of the heart which covers the heart wall. Cardiac muscle tissue is involuntary and controlled by autonomic nervous system. Heart tissue is made up of a specialized cell called cardiomyocytes. Together they are responsible for pumping the heart. The 4 chambers of the heart. The heart is made up of 4 chambers: 2 upper chambers known as the right atrium and left atrium, 2 lower chambers known as the right ventricle and left ventricle. The right heart receives the oxygen-poor blood from the body through pulmonary circulation, and the left heart pumps out the oxygen-rich blood to the body through systemic circulation. Right atrium. The 2 big canal veins return blood to the right atrium from the body. The upper vena cava carries upper body blood and the lower vena cava carries lower body blood. Blood flows into the right ventricle from the right atrium through the right atrioventricular valve or the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve consists of 3 endocardium flaps strengthened by connective tissue. All valves in the circulatory system have general purpose of preventing blood backflow. The purpose of the tricuspid valve is to prevent the flow of blood from the right ventricle to the right atrium when contracting the right ventricle. As the ventricle contracts, blood is forced to close the valve behind the three valve flaps. This is how the blood flows. Deoxygenated blood entering from superior and inferior vena cava into right atrium. Right ventricle. The tricuspid valve closes when the right ventricle contracts and the blood is pumped through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. The pulmonary semilunar valve is at the junction of this large artery and the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts and pumps blood into the pulmonary artery, its three flaps are forced open. Blood tends to come back when the ventricle relaxes, but this fills the valve flaps and closes the pulmonary valve to prevent the blood from flowing back into the right ventricle. Deoxygenated blood entering into the right ventricle from right atrium through tricuspid valve. Deoxygenated blood from right ventricle enter into pulmonary artery through pulmonary semilunar valve and reaches to lungs. Left atrium. In the left atrium, blood comes from the lungs through four pulmonary veins which are present on both sides of heart. That is left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. This blood flows through the left atrioventricular valve into the left ventricle, which is also known as the bicuspid valve or mitral valve. When the left ventricle contracts, the mitral valve prevents blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. Now, the other function of the artery is to produce a hormone that is involved in maintaining blood pressure. When increased blood volume or blood pressure stretches artery's wall, the cells produces ANP, also known as atrial natriuretic peptide, or we can also call it as ANH hormone. Oxygenated blood entering from pulmonary veins into left atrium. Left ventricle. The left ventricle walls are thicker than the right ventricle walls, allowing the left ventricle to contract more vigorously. The left ventricle through the aorta, the body's largest artery, pumps blood to the body. At the junction between the aorta and the left ventricle is the aortic semilunar valve. The left ventricle's contraction forces which also closes the mitral valve open this valve. Now, the left ventricle is the main powerhouse of the heart, having to pump blood all the way around the systemic circulation. Because of this, it has the largest, most muscular walls of any of the chamber. In fact, it is the 3 times as thick as the right ventricle. When the left ventricle relaxes, the aortic valve closes to prevent blood from the aorta to the left ventricle. When the mitral valve closes, it prevents the backflow of blood to the left atrium. The flap of the mitral valve are also anchored by chordae tendineae and papillary muscles. Oxygenated blood from left ventricle enters into aorta through semilunar valve and distributes blood to the tissues. Oxygenated blood from left atrium enters into left ventricle through mitral valve. The 4 valves of the heart. There are 4 valves for 4 chambers of heart. These valves keep the blood moving through the heart in the right direction. The four valves present in heart are the bicuspid valve, which is also known as the mitral valve, the tricuspid valve, also known as the right atrioventricular valve, the aortic semilunar valve, and the pulmonary semilunar valve. The bicuspid and tricuspid valve are located between atrium and the ventricles. The aortic semilunar valve and the pulmonary semilunar valve is located between the ventricles and the major blood vessels leaving the heart, that is the aorta and the pulmonary artery. This is a representation of valves. Thank you.